We are so back
Let's
with
go.
psyched up cinema. Get psyched.
I'm pretty psyched.
Let's fucking go! I'm as psyched as I can be. This week we are covering Turtles all the way down. It is a movie. It is your movie of choice.
Mm-hmm.
So uh yeah, I shouldn't say last week because the last episode we recorded was I think I checked it was the last week in March, and this is currently the last week in July, and this episode probably won't be out till September. So, as long as everything goes
Yeah.
well.
We've been busy.
Yeah, should we do our updates now and then talk
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
movie?
Update. I graduated. I'm an MSW now, baby.
Hmm.
Master of Social Work.
And for me, uh I'm a stockbroker. So, yeah,
Woo!
got my licenses, my 7 and 63 and whatever. So, that's what I do now, and I do this on the side. So,
Yay.
yeah. And I will not discuss what I do any further because I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it. So, but now you have a job as a therapist, and then you're gonna take your test as we're recording this in like 2 weeks.
Eh, we don't need to talk about that.
What?
It's less than 2 weeks at this point. And am I shitting myself over it? Yep. Yep.
What's the name of the test? What's the point of the test for our listeners?
The point of the test is the Association of Social Work Board wants my money.
Yep.
Oh my god, a fly just landed on my microphone. Um, it is not a good representation of whether or not you're a good social worker, but it's a 170 question exam. It's the licensed certified social work exam. If you're in Massachusetts and other states, it's the licensed clinical social worker exam. I won't get into that. It's really confusing and stupid, but basically it's 170 questions, only 150 are graded, and you have to get somewhere between 90 and 108 questions right to pass. Each exam is weighted differently because they determine like how easy or difficult it is, and then the amount of questions you have to get right to pass varies depending on that. It's really stupid. It makes no sense. Anyway, I have to get it.
So you're telling me that you're not even a therapist, you're just a social worker?
Oh my god, don't even. Don't
We're
even.
gonna change our podcast name to Social Work Cinema.
Oh my god. I feel like we need to cover that in an episode because that drives me crazy. And I understand where the confusion comes from, but oftentimes, if you're seeing a therapist, they could be a licensed social worker, and that's the license that they use to practice.
Mm. Well, this is not episode to talk about that.
I'm gonna
so,
get off my soapbox now.
so then you can get off that soapbox to talk about your other soapbox because this is your movie of choice this week.
Yes, it
Or
is.
this episode. I'm gonna refrain from using the term this week. uh so yes, we're gonna be covering Turtles all the way down. I will start with my usual spiel about some facts about the making of the movie. But there's not much because there's no box office because it was just released on HBO Max or Max, or maybe a new name by the time this episode comes out. You never know. Well, now that I think about it, do you know that Disney Plus, Hulu, and HBO Max are going to have like a big bundle? I think they're still going to be Max, Disney Plus, Hulu, but it's just going to be all bundled together. And I think it's like $30 a month with no ads or something like
So
that.
what I'm hearing is we're gradually returning to the cable
Yeah, we're going
format,
back to
but in
cable.
a streaming platform.
Yep. So that's why I just buy movies now. So, anyways, Turtles All the Way Down was released on HBO Max or Max on May 2nd, 2024. Uh, was directed by Hannah Marks, who also directed some movies called After Everything, which is different from the After movies. Than
I
you
was
know.
just gonna ask
Yeah,
that.
I thought the same thing when I first read it, or yeah, I first saw the title because I've seen most of the After movies, unfortunately. I couldn't tell you which ones I've seen. I know I haven't seen the newest one that came out like 2 years ago or something like that. It's like Happily After Ever Happy or some shit like that.
Oh my god.
Uh, After Happily Ever Ever, I think some shit like that. I don't know. Anyways, it's not that after. And then another movie called Don't Make Me Go. I haven't seen either of those. Hannah hasn't really directed a ton of movies, but it seems like the movies she's directed is pretty solid, including this one. So
Go Hannah, she
go Hannah.
crushed it.
Yeah, Hannah did a pretty good job with this movie, so we'll talk about that. Has an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes and a letterbox average of 3.3, which is pretty decent for a letterbox. Um,
Everybody's a critic.
the script was optioned by Fox 2000 Pictures in 2017. Do you know what optioned is?
Nope.
Optioned is when a producer will come up and say, it's kind of think of it like a lease, where you go up, the producer goes up to a screenwriter, it's like, uh, I will pay you a little bit of money now to hold on to the script and try to find people to make this movie. And if I can find somebody, movie gets made, you get paid your full money. If it doesn't get made, uh, then the screenwriter just to keep the option money, and then they could sell that screenplay again. But during that option period, they cannot sell the screenplay to anyone else.
Oh, okay.
So it was optioned by Fox 2000 Pictures, and that is basically like a sub company of 20th Century Fox that kind of produces more like indie movies and stuff like that. Like another popular one is Fox Searchlight. That's another popular one. So they kind of just like a branch company of Fox. But in 2017, that was option, and then when Disney bought Fox in around 2019, New Line Cinema acquired the project, and that is the company who made it, who is also a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, which is also kind of the same thing where they kind of produce more indie-ish movies. They kind of moved away from that, but they still do it. Not much known about production. Seems like production went fine, other than the horrible fact that it was filmed in Ohio. So
Oh.
it wasn't even filmed in Indianapolis. It was filmed in Cincinnati, Ohio. What a
That was such a big plot point.
I know. And what river are we going to? The Cincinnati, Ohio River? Like, come on, folks. So yeah, that is the making of the movie. Basically, this book. I'm sorry, this movie is inspired by the book Turtles All the Way Down, written by John Green. I don't know why I said
That's
Tom.
your name. How'd you fuck that up?
Tom is not my name. I don't know why I said Tom. Anyways, the book was written by John Green. You've read the book. You reminded me a couple times while we watched the movie that you read the book.
Yep.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about the
That's what
book
I'm
here?
here for. What do you want me to tell you about? The book?
Yeah.
Well, um, it was not written by Tom Green. It was written by John
What
Green.
about Hank Green? Did he have any part in
Hank Green's a legend. I
it?
love that man, but no, he took no part in it. Um, John Green gets a reputation for writing manic pixie dream girl characters, and I feel like this book and movie combo are a deviation from that, which was really nice to see. I have to say, even though he does make very stereotypical manic pixie dream girl characters historically, I still really like his books. I really like young adult novels in general. I don't know. They're cute. I feel like you can enjoy it and criticize it at the same time. Anyway, I feel like this book was a deviation from that, and it was telling of a story that I feel like does not get told, and I appreciate the hell out of it for that.
Mm. I've actually never seen any John Green adaptation. I know about them. Like I knew about the Fallen Our Stars and stuff like that. But I've never seen any of them. I knew about the Anne Frank house thing. That's like the only thing I know about the Fault in Our Stars.
So much more than the Anne Frank house. Uh, if you had to take a guess at the inspiration behind Turtles and why John Green deviated from the manic pixie dream girl characters, what would you guess?
Wait, so what am I guessing? Am I guessing like
What was the inspiration?
um something in his life, I guess?
That's so vague.
Well, well, you
Give
gotta
me more.
you gotta
Give
give
me
me a
more.
hint, like
Give me more. Why do you think he took this turn of like now we're talking about a mental health journey?
was it inspired by like another piece of media or something like that, or
It was inspired by his own personal battle with OCD.
oh, okay, I didn't know he had OCD.
Yeah.
Okay, what type of OCD?
I don't know, and, I believe he's intentional about not sharing that. I'll share, a quote from an interview he did with Time Magazine. So, the question that he was asked was, "You've been extremely open about talking about your own struggles with mental illness. What was it like to write about the specific type of OCD and anxiety you suffered from?" And he said basically that he had to write it with enough distance from his own form of OCD to make it so that it wasn't a triggering experience for him, but at the same time, he was sharing the story that he felt needed to be told.
Mm,
He says the word triggering has become so broadly used in popular culture, but anyone who has experienced an anxiety attack knows how badly they want to avoid it. It was really hard, especially at first, to write about this thing that's always been such a big part of my life, but in another way, it was really empowering because I felt like I could give it a form of expression. I could look at it and I could talk about it rather than being scared of it.
okay. I yeah, I think that makes sense because especially well, I haven't read the book, but at least in the movie, how it's like a decent portrayal. Like usually, most of the time when there's like a mental illness in a movie, they kind of treat it as like a superpower, and they kind of make a joke about that in the movie. Um, but most of the time when there's a mental illness, especially with autism, and there's like autism in some movies, they treat it like it's like they're like Professor X or some shit like that.
I hate that trope because it diminishes people think it's empowering, and you know what? If you live with one of those conditions and if it's empowering to you, good for you. But for the average person, I found that it just diminishes the negative experiences that come along with living with a mental health condition, and that's far more damaging than portraying a mental health condition as it is.
Right. Yeah. Um, Yeah, there's not a ton of movies that I can think of off the top of my head that actually do a good job, like showing mental illness, but this is definitely one of them, especially in recent years. I'm sure we're talking about a movie you and I have talked. I'm not going to spoil it, but you and I have talked about a movie
Mm,
for a long time that I want to cover on the show that is really bad at doing it. So I
yeah.
think having this episode before that one is a good counterpiece. Uh, just because this one feels a lot more. I felt like it wasn't like glorified in any way. Obviously, I don't experience OCD. You don't have OCD. So it's hard for us to be in the exact mind of somebody who has OCD, but I feel like this seems like an accurate representation to the point where it's like more believable. And if somebody were to watch it like us that don't have that mental illness can look at it and be like, this seems like what would be an accurate representation of what somebody who has that deals with.
Yeah, and I'll also say that I'm not just basing things off of my own personal experience. I'm basing things off of also my work with people who experience OCD. And I've found that like the thought spiral things, and it's not like the same type of OCD. I'll put out there that I've never worked with somebody with contamination OCD, but the thought spiral thing, very similar. It'll start with like one little thought that just keeps poking at them, and then it just spirals until they can't keep themselves from doing the compulsive behavior.
Mhm. Something I also appreciated about this portrayal is that I think a lot of times when people think of OCD, they think of like those kids from school. They're like, "Oh, I'm such a neat freak. I have
I'm
OCD."
so OCD. I love organizing things. I love being really neat. That makes me OCD. It bothers me when something isn't straight and I have to fix it. Like, oh, the thing on my wall is tilted. I have to fix it. Oh my God, I'm so OCD. I hate that. I hate
Yeah,
that so
I'm
much.
glad they just like in this like didn't even acknowledge it. There's like one joke that Daisy makes like, "Oh, why can't you have the OCD that makes you super smart?" But like that is the only joke about like no, I'm not even gonna say making fun of OCD, but making fun of the stereotype in like in films and media about how like when people has OCD, they're like we were just saying, they're like God. But I'm glad they didn't even acknowledge like the neat freak quotations, the neat freak OCD, something like that that
Yeah.
people claim to have, or that it's all self-diagnosed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really frustrates me that. the biggest portrayal that you see of OCD tends to be on social media, and it tends to be very inaccurate, and it's like people in comment sections of TikToks or Instagram posts where somebody's doing something that's unsatisfying, like somebody's grouting a tile floor and they missed a section, somebody will be like, "Oh my god, that triggered my OCD so bad."
Yeah, especially nowadays, is like the self-diagnose shit is like really bad. Like I'm not
So
gonna say that
bad.
like some people who like don't have shit, but like I think you should maybe get a professional opinion before shouting it from the mountaintops that you have an illness that you probably don't have.
I'll put out there that real diagnosis is a financial privilege
Mhm.
oftentimes, especially diagnoses like autism, ADHD, things that take extensive psychological testing that I cannot even diagnose. I have to send people off to a psychologist for further testing. So I'll put out there therapy is a privilege, diagnosis is a privilege, but at the same time, if you're not a mental health professional and you're not somebody with like extensive lived experiences to share, you might want to look at yourself and ask yourself if you'd be doing more harm than good sharing information about a diagnosis you're not sure that you
Mm.
have.
It's like the equivalent of like searching up like I have a cough on Google and then they tell you that like you have like bronchitis or some
Lung
shit like that.
cancer,
Yeah. it's
you're
and it's
dying.
yeah, it's kind of like that equivalent where people will take it to such an extreme
Yeah.
because that's really all you see on social media is like extreme. I don't want to say the only thing, but a lot of things you see is like an extreme mental illness or anything like that, but not like the middle of the road, the light kind of versions of them, if that makes sense. Not the what, because like online you probably see like the extreme OCD, like what these symptoms are. This is like extreme OCD, but not like like someone who experiences moderate OCD and they see those extreme symptoms and they're like, oh, I have those two things, so I must be OCD.
Yeah. People often forget that identifying with one or two symptoms does not mean necessarily that you have the condition, but it can be so easy to latch on to things that seem familiar and be like, oh, what if that explains my experiences? And you know what? I've done it too. I've gone through a physical health journey where I've been very physically ill and trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with me, and then I'm reading up online about what do my symptoms potentially mean. And when I finally see two of my symptoms under a diagnosis, I'm like, maybe it's that one.
Mhm.
But that does hurt your mental health doing that.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, because also when you do that, because you think you found a sense of hope, and then once you go to seek a professional opinion, then they're like, no, you don't have that.
yeah, I've repeatedly disappointed myself in that way.
So I think that's something people need to learn. But we should probably stray away from this conversation a little bit. We could probably come back to it later, but we should probably talk about more of the
Well,
movie
one
itself and stuff
last
like
thought.
that.
I'm not going to fault people for searching for answers for themselves. I think it's good to advocate for yourself. I think it's human nature to want an explanation for why you are the way you are, because once you figure that out, then you can proceed with treatment. So I don't fault you if you're one of those internet researchers trying to figure out what's going on with your brain or your body, because I think to some extent most of us are guilty of that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
I think it's more so the preaching online that I have this, or like preaching in
yeah.
person that I have this mental illness, but you don't have it. So you're just kind of like, it's honestly kind of harmful to people who actually do experience it because it kind of makes it seem like not as serious when somebody's just going around saying they have OCD, but they actually don't. So like when people think OCD, they think about the people who just, for lack of a better words, yap that they have it,
Yeah.
but they don't actually have
It's
it.
difficult. There's such a fine line between raising awareness and acting like you're a mental health professional online when you don't have those
Yeah.
qualifications. Like, I see a lot of videos that are like, if you do these 10 things, you might be autistic. And there'll be people in the comments who are like, oh my God, I have self soothing behaviors. Am I autistic? Everybody has self soothing behaviors. It's like it's hard because those videos don't encapsulate the context
Mhm.
of those behaviors, and the context is everything,
And the
and the
complexity too.
severity.
Yeah, the severity and the complexity of those things too.
Yeah.
It's just like you can't get that out of a top 10 video.
No.
I'm not gonna diagnose myself from a Watch Mojo video or some shit like that.
So just beware of the content you consume online and how seriously you're taking it and the content that you're putting out online and how you're portraying that information. I think it's important if you're somebody with a diagnosis or self-diagnosis to say, "Hey, take this with a grain of salt. Like this is just my experience."
Yeah,
And to some extent, it's also the audience's responsibility to acknowledge that this may not be a mental health professional saying all these things, and context matters so much.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there's a lot of self-proclaimed people, like on TikTok, that claim they have this profession, but they don't really know anything about it or like have no background in it besides maybe like an AP psych class in high school. Which I mean, if that's the case, then I must be like an AP US history buff because I got like a 3 on that exam.
Yeah. AP Psych is awesome. I loved that class. It does not make you qualified to make diagnoses, period.
Yeah, you need a doctorate to make diagnosis, right? Or at least like major diagnosis, right? Or no, you need to
I can
prescribe.
make diagnoses, it just depends on what it is.
Okay, so certain things, because I know you're saying some things.
Certain diagnoses require psychological testing
Okay, oh yeah, because that's what I
because
was
they're
figuring.
more complex.
Because I know sometimes you might have to talk with a therapist about a certain subject, or
You
not a
mean
psychologist.
consulting with a psychologist?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah, that's what I meant by it.
I can diagnose most things in the DSM, but some things are just so complex that I have to send it off for psychological testing because it's so like contextual that I need somebody to put in the work of doing the thorough testing to make sure like, you know, is this ADHD or is this anxiety or is this a manifestation of trauma? To weed out those things in the context of therapy is much harder
Yeah.
and it warrants psychological testing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll get off my diagnostic soapbox.
You're getting off all these soapboxes
I
today.
know.
You're on the Mount
I'm gonna
Everest
be
of
so
soapboxes.
clean after all this soap.
So let's talk about the movie for a little bit. We're probably going to come back to the way the movie portrays OCD because that's, I mean, that's kind of a big part of this movie is the OCD aspect. But we can maybe talk about some of the other things about it first, like the acting and shit like that. You know,
Mm.
the two things that go into a movie: OCD and acting and shit. And so, so uh, I guess I'll start. I guess I liked all of the performances in the movie. I think everyone was pretty good. I think everyone seems age appropriate too.
Yeah.
The characters seem a little mature, but I think that makes sense given their context. Because I think Daisy isn't that mature, but I think that makes sense. But Asa and
Davis.
Davis, yeah, I was gonna say Daniel, but I knew that wasn't it. Asa and Davis seem pretty mature, but that also makes sense for those
Yeah.
characters. So I feel like they kind of line up. And I also think Michael is the Daisy's boyfriend. I
Yeah.
think he's also age appropriate too. He's a little closer to mature, but like I feel like he's still like a teenager because all these people are like senior in high school. So I feel
Yeah.
like all these people are like viable. I think they all do a really good job with their performances. I don't think any of the characters are like Oscar groundbreaking stuff like that, but they're good performances.
They're
They're really good.
talented
Yeah,
for
they are.
sure.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they definitely have like a very good career in their future because of all of them are really good. And you made this point that Davis kind of looks like a young Leonardo DiCaprio a little bit.
It
He
does.
kind of does, like a '90s Leonardo DiCaprio with like Romeo plus Juliet. Have you seen
Yes.
Romeo plus Juliet?
Yes.
Oh god, that movie is bonkers, absolute bonkers town. But yeah, I think everyone's really good in this. What about you? What are some of your thoughts?
I agree. I think everyone did a really good job with their acting, and I gotta give props. She's a minor character, but the mom,
Mhm, yeah, the
she's
mom is
pretty
really
great.
good.
She's
Yeah,
pretty great. And also, I want to point out the fact that Asa and Davis are more mature because both of them went through significant trauma at a young age,
mhm,
and oftentimes when you go through significant trauma at a young age, you're like forced to grow up because both of them had to bury a parent, and no child should ever have to go through that.
yeah,
So it makes sense why they're more like existential thinking because can you really fault them for being like, why did this happen to me? Why me?
Yeah.
And contemplating the meaning of life and stuff
Mhm.
after that happened. I can't blame them.
Yeah. Obviously, I do like that. I do like there's like a visual style when she experiences her OCD. I'm sure we'll probably talk about this again. But she has a. I think they shoot this movie in what an anamorphic lens. It's like a different type of lens. Something that you can kind of tell when they shoot with it is the edge of the frame kind of gets warped, and they get these little like circle distortions and stuff like that on it. That's kind of throughout the movie, but I feel like they use a different type of lens when she experiences her OCD because that warp thing is like really hard there. I'm not sure if it's like a digital effect or something they did with the camera lens. But I really like that because it kind of gives like a nice separation. And sometimes they'll do it even in between scenes, like when Daisy and Ace are like rowing the boat down the poop river or whatever. Uh, when Daisy is rowing and like Aza's in her mind, you can see like kind of the background's all warped and stuff like that. But when you cut back to Daisy, it looks more normal. And then once Daisy kind of talks Aza down, she you don't go back to that frame or that lens. It's like it cuts away from it, it doesn't go back to it. So that's something that's interesting where it has like a nice separation to it from her what like is reality and what's like in her head.
I really liked that because when I read the book and heard that there was going to be a movie adaptation, and I read the book a long time ago. It was like 7 years, no, like 5 years ago. It was like 5 years ago when I read the book, and hearing that it was getting a movie adaptation, I was wondering how they were going to execute the difference between Aza's OCD thought spiral brain and her rational thoughts trying to bring her down to earth, because in the book it's portrayed as like an argument back and forth where Aza's thoughts are in normal text and her anxious OCD thoughts are in italics, and it goes back and forth like they're having a fight. And that I feel like did a really good job at differentiating Aza's thoughts that she feels like are representative of her values and what she wants in her life, and the anxious thoughts that try to take over. I was wondering how they were going to do that in the movie, and I think they did a really good job.
Yeah. I think there's only like one point where there's like an argument between her is in the hospital, which I we'll talk about, but I think some of the
I'm glad
voiceover
they
for that
did
part.
that.
Yeah, I think on the second rewatch, I think the voiceover is a little weak. Um, it's hard to tell if it's lacking presence or if it's kind of missing some of the performance there. Um, because when it feels like she's like when she's like yelling at herself about like she's a monster and stuff like that, it felt like it was taking a back seat, but it really shouldn't have been. That really should have been the vocal point. I'm not sure if maybe it was something in the audio mix or something like that where they were trying to bring out more diegetic sound than what was in her head, or if it was like the performance kind of felt a little monotone. I'm not blaming the actress for this. I think it's this is more of like a direction thing, but I think that's something that was kind of a big moment. I think in the scene it was kind of missing that presence rather than focusing on the diegetic sound of her like putting the soap like using the soap thing and using the sink and stuff like that's just kind of my thought though.
The way that I interpreted that is that the OCD thoughts are stated in her brain like they're facts. So they don't really have emotion behind them. So it's like, you're gonna die. Like, that's just a fact. You're gonna die.
Mm,
You're gonna get C. diff. This is gonna happen.
mm,
And Aza, her voice has more emotion because she's the one who's suffering, hearing those words go through her brain like they're true, like they're fact.
mm.
And there's this one line, I bawled my eyes out the first time I watched this movie. I'm gonna put that out there. There's this one line where she says something along the lines of, "You can have this body, I don't want it anymore."
I think she says that in the movie, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I thought did you say it come from the book too? Was it in the book as well or is
Yes.
okay.
Yep. And that line, I was like, that's crushing.
Yeah.
She feels like her thoughts don't belong to her, and she's reacting that in the way of, like, "Just have it. I don't want it anymore. Like, this isn't a life that I'm enjoying."
Mhm.
And I think it shows, like, how much she's taking these monotone statements to heart because to other people, they're harmless, they're not true. To her, there's statements of absolute truth and fact.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting because now when you mention the monotone, I can definitely see it in the OCD because her OCD monotone like voiceover when it does happen, it doesn't happen like a ton. I think it's like maybe like happens a lot more in the beginning than it does throughout. So I think maybe throughout the movie, maybe it happened like 5, 7 times or something like that. And then it comes back at the end of the hospital. But yeah, all of that is very monotone and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a lot more back and forth in the book. And I feel like in a way the movie kind of missed that, but also I'm going to give it grace cuz how much could they really do that in a movie?
Yeah, there had to be like voiceover throughout the entire fucking movie, and like
Yeah,
that would
pretty
just be so
much.
lame.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants to listen to voiceover for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I think another thing I didn't really like, I think we briefly touched on this last night when we watched it, was I think the way the murder of Davis's dad gets resolved is kind of, uh, for lack of a better word, stupid. I think just like they're like just chilling, they're vibing, and then they just find his jacket, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And then they find like a suicide note in the fucking jacket. It's just like,
Yeah. I much prefer the book ending.
I do think the book. I think the book is a little bit better because it leaves it. Because you're saying they just find it by this scent. They think they
They
smell like a dead body.
smell rotting flesh, and Asa goes and reports it to Davis and basically says, "It's up to you, whatever you want to deal with, however you want to deal with it. Go ahead. Like, I'm not going to tell the police because once they find the father dead, then the money goes to the fucking lizard." Um, but people who are missing aren't declared dead until 7 years go by. So Asa figured she'd tell Davis, and he could choose whether he wanted 7 more years in the house to kind of plan his future of not having his father's money anymore and having to move out of the mansion and everything. So she puts it in his hands. Um, and she doesn't see anything. There's like no evidence of the father that she can see. It's dark and they just smell rotting flesh and suspect that's what's going on after they mentally put the pieces of the puzzle together with the jogger's mouth note.
Right.
And I preferred that. And Davis ends up reporting it to the police because he decides that Noah really needed the closure, so he does it for his brother. And that I feel like I don't know, that says a lot about his character and we kind of lose that in the
Yeah.
way that the movie portrays it.
Yeah, because it doesn't make much sense in the movie where, because they mentioned the lizard thing once, like literally once, and that's it. And it's fine to only mention it once, but then it never comes back around because then Aza's like, no, I want to tell him because I don't want to hear from a police officer. But it's like, but fucking why? It's like you think you may suspect someone died. You found a suicide note. Why not report it to the police? It doesn't make much sense in the context of the movie because they only mentioned the lizard thing once and they never mention his inheritance ever again. They never mention that they can't afford to live in the house. So it's just kind of like one of those things where it's just
Yeah.
like, I don't want to hear from police, but it doesn't make much sense why.
It's a much bigger point in the book, and I'll say that in the book, Asa actually gets to meet the giant lizard, and it's like a whole thing where there's like a secret entrance into the lizard's cage. Yeah, it's a whole thing in the
Mhm.
book, but they bring it up much more. But I agree, they don't drive home that point of like if Davis's father is found, then he loses everything. The
Right.
stakes are not as high in the movie.
And then it would make more sense why Daisy doesn't want to say it to the police.
Asa.
Asa, yeah, I don't know what, yeah, I mixed that up. Daisy was there, that's why I got mixed
Yeah.
up. And she also found the suicide note. But yeah, so it doesn't make much sense why Asa doesn't want to tell a police officer at that point if it was maybe mentioned just a couple more times. I feel like they could have maybe squeezed it in a couple more times or
Yeah.
something like that. Uh, like even like maybe on the scene when they're reflecting at the pool, Davis could have said something like, "I don't know how like I'll make it if my dad's dead," or something like that, or just something along those lines where it kind of drives it home. I don't think you need to make like five more scenes about it. I think maybe
Yeah.
just a couple more lines that they'll be broke if this doesn't happen. If they find this the dad's dead or something like that.
Yeah. I kind of get your point about the telling the police part, but at the same time, putting myself in Aza's position, she knows Davis lost his mother traumatically. Having to get the news about it, him being an orphan from the police, that's traumatic.
Right.
If Aza delivers the information, she can make sure that it's done with love and care
Right.
and compassion and from somebody who has also experienced a traumatic loss.
Mm. Yes, but I think maybe they could have conveyed it as, Daisy, why don't you report this to the police and I'll go and tell Davis myself before the police get there or something like that.
Well, what benefit do they have to tell the police?
Well, they're reporting a murder, so I mean,
It's not a murder.
or a suicide. They may suspect they
Yeah,
found a
but he's
suicide note.
dead. Period. Like what does telling the police
Well, I mean, you
do
found
anything?
evidence to somebody missing, and we know it's kind of a big part of the movie where they have this reward for finding any information on the Davis's dad being missing, and then they. I mean, I'm not even like mad that they don't bring up the money for Davis's thing, but I mean, it's a big deal if they're putting up a reward for any information about the missing person.
Yeah, I think at that point we're supposed to assume that the focus is more on making sure Davis is okay.
Yeah, but I still just don't fully buy the like more so like the coat is just sitting there, and
Yeah,
then the police are gonna go to
that's what I
police.
was confused about. Did the man just take his Burberry coat off with the suicide note and then climb up to
The
the
bridge or whatever.
bridge and jump off? I don't know. Why did he
Yeah,
take his clothes
that's what I was like, because like the rotting flesh smell makes I kind of buy that a little bit more, and I get why maybe you don't do that in the film, just because you don't have the sensation of smell. But I mean, you also don't have that in the book, but you also don't have anything in the book, so
well, you have more of her inner monologue.
yeah. So you kind of don't have that in the book. It might seem like a cop out in the movie to be like something stinks, and then it's kind of like
Yeah,
go like
I
that.
guess.
But I don't know. Part of me kind of wants to see that version of it because I feel like that sounds better. It sounds more realistic, I guess.
Yeah, because the father didn't kill himself in the book. He died due to exposure. He was camping out in the tunnels waiting for the whole thing to blow over. I think we're supposed to assume. Um, and the reason that Asa tells Davis and Noah, um, Davis and Noah decide to report it is because they needed to know because Noah is absolutely heartbroken with the thought of like if my dad is alive, why is he not trying to get into contact with me?
Hmm.
That is much more impactful than well, he killed himself.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Something while we're talking about this, because in the book you had mentioned to me that John Green was kind of struggling to like write an ending,
Yeah.
and I mean in the movie this is part of the ending. But why don't you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I saw an interview with John Green, I want to say. I think it was an interview. I couldn't find it again, but I distinctly remember him saying that he had a really hard time finding an appropriate ending for the book and consequently the movie. They have kind of the same ending. Um and he really molded over for a long time and he decided to opt for the like X amount of years later things are better. And he felt like that was a cop out. He did not like that that's how he ended her story. And I don't know about you, but I liked it. I liked the ending.
Is the movie ending basically pretty similar to the book ending?
Yeah.
Because yeah, I like the ending. I think I like the Daisy monologue at the end.
That's the
The
only difference. In the book, it was Aza basically revealing that this whole book has been her reflecting upon her life as from the perspective of her future self and saying like myself in that moment didn't realize that I'd be going on to get married and having kids and I'd still struggle with my mental health and I'd get hospitalized and then I'd put myself back together and keep succeeding and
yeah, I like the ending. I think, and I like I was saying, I do think because I mean I don't think that ending for the book would work in the movie just for
yeah,
because then it'd be like we're gonna take a step back from this movie and I'm gonna tell you why I've been telling you this whole movie. It
yeah.
sounds a little weird,
It
but I
was
do.
better in the context of movie
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
do it with Daisy.
See, I do like that Daisy speech. I think it's good because the movie overall is kind of like I don't want to say overall, but it's mostly kind of sad. I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
a good feeling movie because like I mean, there's some happy things about it, but I mean, like at a certain point, everything about it is just like negative, 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 negative. So it's just kind of like I think it's nice to have like that uplifting ending as part of it.
Well, I like that it was a realistic kind of middle of the road ending. I wouldn't really call it a happy ending because I mean Daisy or Aza, depending if you're talking about the movie or the book, says that she does go on to be hospitalized again and to really struggle with her OCD and she has moments of relapse where things are really bad again, but she never has to go through it alone
Right.
and she's still able to have a meaningful life even though she is still battling OCD and it's not like this magical ending where her OCD disappears because that's not the story of many people with OCD. It doesn't just disappear one day.
Mm,
So I really liked that the ending was honest.
right. Well, I think that's the same with most like mental illness. It's just
Yeah.
like it's not like it goes away or anything like that.
You learn to make room for it and to accommodate for it, and you learn coping skills to deal with it, but that doesn't mean that there won't be hard times where you feel like it's starting to take over.
Hmm.
But it also doesn't mean that it's like a battle lost.
Yeah.
I like there was one line in the book where Asa said something like, "I feel like people want me to tell them the story of somebody who slays the beast, but the beast is part of me. It kind of is me in a sense, and I'm not going to be able to just kill it.
Hmm.
Doesn't just go away."
Yeah. So I like the ending. Yeah. I think and I think the ending kind of encapsulates that too. I don't think it goes into as much detail like what you were saying, like how she gets hospitalized and stuff like that, but I think it
It
kind of
does.
flashes over it. I mean, it's not like an
Does.
explicit yeah. Well, it's not like she explicitly says it.
Yes, she does. It shows her in a hospital waiting room, and
Yeah.
then Daisy says, "But you don't have to do it alone." And then Daisy appears in the chair next to her.
Mm. Yeah.
So it does.
Yeah, that's what I
And
mean,
she's
but
filling
yeah.
out like hospital paperwork. You
Yeah.
see
No, I
that.
know that, but I'm saying it's not like they explicitly tell you, like vocally in the monologue, that like you will be hospitalized, and
Yeah.
that's what I mean by it.
Well, I think she says something vague like there's still gonna be
Be
tough
yeah,
times.
yeah, definitely, yeah, and they flash to a couple of things, and one of those things is the hospital.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I like the way the movie handles the ending. I think the ending's pretty good overall. Um, what else is there? I do like because I don't think we're gonna come back to it. I do like the car, the whole Camry subplot.
Harold.
Yeah, Harold. I do like that whole subplot because she doesn't really mention her dad like a ton throughout the movie, but I feel like there's like I mean there's that one scene where she picks up Daisy in the car, and I feel like that scene is like all you need because it's like you get the car motivation why she's such a stickler about keeping
Yeah.
it clean and stuff like that, and I feel like when that car accident happens again, it's almost like he died twice,
Yeah.
and it's something a moment that I liked that I appreciated on the second rewatch that I didn't notice it too much on the first watch is when she says something like "Oh, my dad's gonna kill me" or something like that,
Oh
or
my
and then he
god, that
and
scene.
and then he says like, "Oh, I've been doing this for a long
The
time." Your parent,
firefighter.
yeah, and like
Ugh,
that firefighter has good intention,
he
and
does.
I'm sure, like, when you hear somebody say that, that's the first thing I think of. So, like, you think like he's doing the right thing, and like in his mind, he is doing the right thing,
Yeah.
but like he didn't know the full context, so it's kind of like it's like an extra whammy when you hear it because it's like, no, that was the dad. Like that's all
That was
that.
the
Yeah,
part of him that lived on
yeah,
after he died.
yeah,
Oh my god, that scene ripped my heart out and stomped all over it. That scene broke me. That had me sobbing.
Mhm,
Because you're right, it's like he died twice. And one of the lines in the book that gets lost in the movie that I really loved is how Asa talks about how her dad died once, but also over time, like as her memories of him fade
mhm,
and she finds a harder time imagining what life with him would have been in her present moment. It's like she says something like, he died once, but he also died over the years.
mhm,
And he continues to die, but that also means that in a way he continues to live.
mhm,
Oh, I love that. I love that line about grief. It's so real.
yeah, and then I think the movie kind of misses that, but also I feel like the movie doesn't really need it
Yeah.
because like, the movie's already 2 hours as is. I feel like to add that stuff
It was
back
two
in,
hours.
yeah, it's like an hour 56 minutes.
Doesn't really feel like
No,
it.
it doesn't. It has like a nice length to it. I'm pretty sure it's like an
Yeah.
hour 50. Uh, but I don't think it really needs it. I think I haven't read the book. Obviously, I'm gonna state this again. I haven't read the book, but I feel like the the message and the main point of the book seems to get through to the movie for the most part. So I know a lot of people, especially with like the Harry Potter movies, they're like, "This is not." This is not the book and stuff like that. The book has, yeah, the book is also like 600 fucking pages. It's like,
Something's got to be cut out
yeah,
here.
it's like, I know a lot of people don't like this. I'm not going to stay on this tangent for too long, but I know a lot of people don't like Goblet of Fire because it's not very accurate to the book at all. And a lot of people who read the book like Order of the Phoenix because it's pretty accurate to the book. But also at the same time, it's like, you can't one for one a book.
Yeah.
It's impossible to, if you one for one a book adaptation, it's gonna fucking suck. It's
Yeah.
it's gonna suck ass. Like Lord of the Rings is like regarded as one of the best movie franchises ever, and those movies are certainly not one for one the books. Like they're definitely heavily inspired, but they merge characters, they cut storylines, they shorten stuff because a fucking book is not a movie, and a movie is not a book. It's like you can't one for one it.
Stylistic choices that are executed in writing cannot be one for one executed on screen.
Yeah, exactly. Like imagine like you were talking about a lot of the like the internal monologue in the book. And I'm sure that works great for the book.
Yeah.
But imagine this fucking movie with like 2 hours of internal monologuing. You want to fucking shoot yourself. It's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to listen to that for 2 hours.
You know what I just realized was cut out of the book, which makes a lot of sense why it was cut out, but Davis has a blog online that Asa discovers where he clips quotes from like literature, philosophical literature,
Mhm,
and writes about how it applies to his life. And it's like an online diary. And that's how she kind of finds more about how he feels about her as he writes about her.
mhm.
That it's just not necessary.
Yeah, it's not. And also it doesn't make because like at this point Daisy already has the fanfic, like Star Wars fanfic. It's like
Yeah.
how many fucking people are gonna have blogs?
Yeah.
It's
That's
like how
true.
many people are
That's
doing
true.
this?
Yeah, I can't disagree there.
Um yeah, I think
What did you think of the turtles all the way down concept? The whole basis of the movie is off of that story of the professor and the lady debating about the earth.
Earth. Welcome to
Earth.
Earth. I like that. I think it's a good story, and I feel like it encapsulates how Ace is feeling, how she doesn't feel like herself. I feel like that in that moment, that professor in that story is really interesting, and it ties really well to that character. And also something that's not in the book is that whole professor character too.
Which I'm glad they did that in the movie.
Yeah, and I think it fits really well in the
It
movie. And I
does.
also does in the book does she have the motivation to like want to go to school out of state? Is that part of it?
She does, yeah. But there's less of, like, the conversation with the mom of, like I don't think the whole garage converting
Uh-huh.
conversation happens, which I'm glad they did that in the movie.
Yeah, I
Because
think it fits really well.
briefly, I wanna talk about the mom character.
Mhm.
I feel like that mom is, like, such a true to real life character because she's the overly concerned mother and she just wants what's best for her kid, but she's not necessarily doing it in the way that conveys the message to the kid that she's just worried about her. It comes across like, I don't trust that you can succeed.
Mhm. Yeah. So I do agree. I think the mother is really good in this movie, and I think we mentioned that she's not in it a whole lot, but when she's in it, it feels like impactful, and I think that's what really matters. It feels like every scene with her matters, and nothing is filler or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why the one scene I found weird was like when she stopped her in the hallway to say like, "Let's go see a movie."
Yeah.
When I first like was watching, I was like, it's like are they like friends? And then there was this, I was like, what the fuck are they talking about? But then I realized it was her mom. But I get why I put it in because to show that she's a teacher and shit like that at the
Yeah.
school. But I feel like besides that one thing, I think everything else was pretty impactful with her and everything felt important to the story and Aza's character.
I really liked the hospital scene where Aza's mom says to her, I called Dr. Singh. I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. And Aza's like, it's okay.
Yeah. And she
Because
thanks her for it.
yeah. And she's just so desperate to help her kid. And she knows her kid might be upset that she called the shrink on her, but
Yeah.
she didn't know what else to do, and that must be such a helpless position to be the parent of somebody with mental health issues that you don't really understand.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I love so much about being able to see the dynamic. You could see that the mother doesn't understand, and she doesn't understand the impact of the way that she tries to help Aza, but she's trying so hard.
Right. It kind of I don't want I'm only gonna stay on this. I'm gonna pivot for like 1 second and I'm gonna get back to this.
Okay.
But I there's some movies where when you rewatch it, you start to feel bad for like the other characters. And like the last time I watched Coraline, like I watched it and like I felt like so bad for the mom in that. I'm not going to elaborate any further because we're definitely going to do an episode on that one day. But like I feel like the same way in this movie where I think this time when I watched it, like I felt really bad for her because she's really trying. Like she's trying her hardest. And at some points it feels like nothing can go right. Like she was trying to do the garage thing for her and like it kind of got thrown back at her. Ace just not spending time with her, not communicating with her. So it's kind of like you feel bad for her because like you're saying she's trying so hard and then it kind of pays off in this because like
Yeah.
she thanks her and stuff like that so I think it does a good job where it's like that character is so small in the grand story but is so impactful to the overall movie.
Yeah. I think in the story of anybody in real life with mental health conditions, there will always be the character of somebody that tries really hard and the execution is just not lining up with what the person experiencing the mental health condition needs from them. But it doesn't mean that they're not trying and it's not with good intention. And I love that towards the end, Aza and her mom start communicating better and then things turn out better. And it shows the importance of communication when it comes to mental illness because when people around somebody with a mental illness have a better understanding of it and the way that their approach to it makes that person feel, then they can change things and they can do better. But it's really hard when you're suffering from a mental illness to put into words what it's like because it's a non physical thing. You can't make somebody feel what it's like to be in a brain that has OCD.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I love about the Turtles All the Way Down thing. And I wanted to read a quote from John Green from the same Time magazine article. He said, this is about why he used the Turtles All the Way Down story. He said, the point of the story is that the scientist is right, but the old woman saying that the world rests on turtles all the way down situation, she's also right. they're both right because obviously the world is a sphere. I'm not like a flat earther or anything. I love that he clarifies that. But the world is also the stories that we tell about it. The stories that we tell about it matter. They shape the actual world and they shape our actual lives. So that is what's very helpful to me in thinking about why I like writing and reading, but it's also helpful to me in reminding me that I do have some say in framing my own experience. Even though I may go for long periods of time where I don't have control over my thoughts, and that's scary and destabilizing for my sense of self, I do have some say in the story of my life.
Mhm.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I think it's interesting, and I think that fits pretty well in the movie too. It kind of does it without explicitly saying it or anything like that. So,
Yeah.
and I think that I do think that with that new storyline of the professor, um, and her saying that spiel is pretty impactful in the movie, and it kind of builds up, and it builds up to that hospital moment and stuff like that. Really,
Yeah.
because that is the midpoint of the movie, and that kind of progresses from there closely to the low point there. But I think it is really impactful there, and I think it definitely starts a shift in Aza's character.
Yeah. And it's someone she really looked up to, and I think she needed to hear that perspective on things, that you questioning the meaning of your life and whether you're real does not make you less human, it makes you more human, more
Yeah,
real.
yeah, absolutely.
And raising awareness of the importance of things that we can't really physically see. Like, we can't see our thought process, the stories that we tell ourselves, the story of our lives. But it doesn't mean that that is not what matters most about being a human being. Just because a mental illness isn't like a broken bone that you can see on an x ray does not mean that it can't be debilitating and it can't be put to words and understood somehow.
Hmm.
Even though it's really hard to do that, because like I said, it's not like I can put you in an OCD brain to help you understand.
Yeah, something that I also find interesting. It was kind of briefly mentioned on was her reluctance to use medication because her therapist tells her that she's fine just the way she is, but also kind of wants to put her on medication to make her feel better. So it's nice that Asa has this confliction of she wants to be herself with OCD, but also wants to be, in quote, normal, but is reluctant to take pills to be more, in quote again, normal.
Yeah, because she's afraid that's going to ruin her sense of self because OCD, in a way, is a part of her
Mm.
and it's something she's battling.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tease the two apart because we are our experiences and it doesn't mean that we like them either.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think that's only briefly mentioned on, but I think it is kind of an interesting fact that kind of plays into mental illness. It's like mental illness sometimes is like part of you and you can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
But also, do you want to lose that part of yourself by taking medication and maybe possibly losing some of your sense of self? So I think it's interesting.
And often people with conditions like ADHD go through that because the ADHD brain processes things differently in ways that can be really cool and unique, but also in ways that can be incredibly disruptive, especially in a learning context. So it is a trade off and it is an internal battle that a lot of people go through and that I try to support clients through because it's not an easy decision to make.
Yeah. And also, I know, because I know a couple people with ADHD, they take medicine and makes them fucking tired. Like that ADHD medicine makes them like exhausted.
Yeah,
So
it's a trade off.
yeah. And so it's like, do you want to be jumping off the wall and not being able to like focus on something, or do you want to be sleepy?
Yeah, and that is often why medication compliance can be really hard for somebody with different mental health conditions is it feels like no matter what my choice is here, I have to give something up.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's not an easy decision to make. You either have to like give up what you feel like is a part of your sense of self or give up this idealized concept of being quote unquote normal.
Yeah. I agree.
I wanted to wrap things up by saying that I really appreciate Turtles in the sense that it is a well-rounded story of someone's life who just happens to experience mental illness. I don't think Turtles is a mental illness story. It's a story of somebody's life and that person happens to battle mental illness,
Mhm.
which is what I love about it so much. It's not just like, this is what living with OCD is like. And I wrote down some themes that Turtles covers that I feel like makes it such a rich story. So it's a mental health journey, but it's also romance story between Aza and Davis and between Daisy and Michael. It's a story of friendship and how Aza struggles with maintaining healthy friendships because of her difficulties with OCD, and sometimes battling a mental illness can make it really hard to think about people outside yourself because you're going through so much internally. And it's her journey to being a better friend and showing up more for other people despite her own condition. It's a story of parenting and how her mother learns to be a good parent for somebody with a condition that she knows she'll never really be able to understand. It's a mystery, a story of Davis's dad going missing and then finding him. It's a coming of age story and all this development in a pivotal time in a kid's life. It's a story of grief. So many like deaths and losses, even in like the way that Davis is going to lose his home. He's going to lose the only place he's ever known. And Aza lost her dad. Davis has now lost both parents. Aza feels like she's losing her sense of self. There's a lot of grief, a lot of loss. Existentialism is a big theme, and philosophy and wondering the meaning of life is a big part of it. Corporate greed with Davis's
Yeah,
dad
yeah, definitely.
and leaving everything to the lizard.
I do think something I do kind of bring up, I think the existentialism is kind of missing in the movie a little bit. I think there's
I
one
agree.
existentialist scene where they're looking at the stars and it's like they see their life from 12 light years away, which I think is a really interesting scene. I like that scene, but there's nothing else like it in the movie.
Yeah. I think my brain sometimes confuses scenes from the book and the movie, but I'll say the book has more existentialism. And if you liked that part of the movie, read the book. Read the book. It's so good. And the last point I'll hit on is privilege, especially when they get that money. What it means to Aza and what it means to Daisy are two different
Mhm.
things, and how they perceive spending the money is different. Like Daisy buys a car and Aza judges her for it, and she's like, "You already had a car."
Yeah. I do agree with I don't want to rope back into discussion, so this will be the last thing I bring up. But I do like how the Star Wars fanfic comes up with the Ayala. I think that's the Star Wars character.
Ayala, something
Ayala.
like
Yeah, that's
that.
what it is. I do like that reveal because you're like when you like, oh damn, what a fucking asshole. But then
Yeah.
like that conversation with Daisy and her having in the car, and I'm kind of on Daisy's side a little bit. Part of me is kind of like, yeah, Asa does kind of seem to be absent. She doesn't know anything about Daisy or anything like that. So it was kind of like one of those things that, yeah, it's a shitty thing to do. She acknowledges it's a shitty thing, but like it kind of acknowledge why Ayala exists as like a venting tool.
Yeah. I think being either person in that situation's hard because Daisy couldn't ever conceptualize why it is that Aza struggles to be a good friend and to show up for her friends, but Aza could also never truly understand what it's like to be Daisy, where her best friend is kind of always mentally absent in a way and doesn't even really know much about her in some realms of her life because she's so wrapped up in her thoughts, understandably, that she finds it hard to learn about other people and be curious about other people's lives because she's already so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I like that neither person was really villainized.
No, not at all.
And
I
in the
think
end, they made up.
Daisy is initially, but then in that scene, it's not. She's like that villainization is kind of dropped.
Yeah, because you realize just how hard of a position she's been in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, you don't get her side of her story until that point, which I think is like only like two, three scenes later. or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's not that much later that happens. I do think Michael's mustard analogy was fucked up though.
Yeah,
That
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 was
mustard
me.
analogy was
No,
omega fucked.
Michael never got confronted about that in the book or the movie, which kind of upset me because that mustard analogy, I was like, "Oh my god, that would destroy me if someone compared me to fucking mustard. I'm relish."
What will it be? Ketchup or mustard?
My
Epic SpongeBob movie reference. Alright, is that all we have to say?
That is all I have to say. Watch the movie, read the book. They're both worthwhile. I love the movie, I love the book, and I think you'll enjoy them too, if these are kinds of themes that interest you.
Yeah. I think it's a good movie.
Good movie.
I give it a good movie out of 10.
I give it a great movie out of 10.
Whoa, that's like an extra good.
Yeah, that's like 2 goods. That's like good squared.
If you were to have Letterbox, what would you rate this movie? So Letterbox is out of 5.
I'm not like
I'm
I'm
putting you
not
on
a
the spot right now.
critical person. I'm not somebody that likes to assign numbers to things. It feels wrong. It feels like it doesn't do it justice. All I'm going to say is that it's a great movie and I think you should watch it. Period. No rating. This is why I don't have Letterbox.
Well, you could just be one of those people on Letterbox that don't rate things and just put likes or they don't like it.
I'm not getting a Letterbox. Please. This is our day-to-day life. Like every time we watch a movie together, this is the bullshit conversation that we have. I'm tired of it.
We didn't talk about this one during the SpongeBob movie when we watched that. What would you rate the SpongeBob movie on this rating?
Epic out of 10.
That's like a 5 out of 5, right?
I don't know.
SMH. I gave it a 5
You're
out of
not
5.
getting this information out of me.
All right. I gave it a 4, so.
Okay. Congratulations. Everybody's a
Congratulations.
critic.
Should we send it off? Are we done?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Psyched Up Cinema.
Thanks.
Thank you. We are so back. Give us a follow on the gram.
Give us 5 stars
Give
because
it-
we're worth 5
Yep, give us 5
stars.
stars out of 10, just like I did the SpongeBob movie.
5 stars out of 5, not out of 10.
Oh yeah, give us 5 out of 5, not 5 out of 10.
Please don't give us a 50%. That's going to hurt my feelings.
I don't want to be rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, so please give us a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. Or maybe you're one of those fractional people that does like 9.6 or some shit like that, like a fucking lunatic. Give us a 9.6 or something like that. You can rate us on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. I don't think, you can rate us on Spotify.
Yeah.
If you listen on Prime Music for some fucking reason, you can listen to us there.
Also, you're weird for that.
You are weird for that. We're on YouTube. Share with your friends and family. Follow us on the socials. I think that's about it. Isn't
Yeah.
it? Anyways, I'm John.
I'm Kate.
I don't think we said our intros, so that's
Oops.
we're getting to the end. And goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.